Hey guys, JLBZombie here and welcome back to another video. Really hope you're all doing well. So as promised, I'm going to be ranking the essential Universal monster movies, as I've reviewed every single essential Universal monster movie that there is. There are 8 movies to rank here. Let's not waste any time, let's get straight into it. So the movie that I've placed right at the bottom of my list at number 8 is The Mummy. Now people might think that that's a bit of a, whoa, you've put The Mummy at number 8? Well, yeah, because as I mentioned in my review, shameless plug, mummy movies don't really click with me. Now, growing up, I actually really had a soft spot for The Mummy and The Mummy Returns with Brendan Fraser. In fact, me and my cousin would sort of watch those movies on a loop. But growing up, I just delved more into different genres. I preferred zombie movies, obviously, vampires, werewolves. In fact, I must mention the only exceptional mummy movie for me would be Hammer Studios' version with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. I love that version. But as for the Universal version, it doesn't do anything for me. But what I will say is that the opening scene of the film is great. It's superb, the opening scene. I thought that was really, really well executed. After that, I kind of just shut off. But I can say that Karloff does give his all in this performance, so that's a plus that I will give the film. So that's my thoughts on The Mummy. Okay, so the following films from here I really, really love, and from this point it was quite tricky to rank the movies. I was only positive about my number 1 choice. The rest was quite tricky to rank, so there was a bit of switching here and there, but I've managed to do it, and this is my number 7 spot. Creature from the Black Lagoon is the movie that I've chosen for my number 7 pick. As I mentioned in my review, the 1950s was definitely the year for creature features. I mean, come on, the film is called The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I think it's no doubt that Steven Spielberg, whilst making his hit blockbuster movie Jaws, really took inspiration from Creature from the Black Lagoon. In this movie there are fantastic underwater sequences. And whilst we're on the topic, massive kudos goes to Rico Browning, who played the creature underwater. The reason why he was chosen for the movie was because they liked the way he swam in the creature costume. Also, you can't mention Rico Browning without mentioning Ben Chapman. Ben Chapman was inside the creature costume when the creature was on land. My last 2 kudos goes to Millicent Patrick and Bud Westmore, who were the creature designers for the film. And to finally wrap up talking about this movie, I want to talk about the creature itself, the Gill Man. The Gill Man is a completely original creature. Usually Universal monsters are taken from literature or history. For example, literature would be the Phantom of the Opera, or Dracula, or Frankenstein's monster. History, of course, you have the Wolfman. But the creature, totally original, absolutely original, and you can always see the creature lurking behind the other Universal monsters. So he seems to fit in perfectly, and now he's become such an iconic creature that he's so recognisable. So that was Creature from the Black Lagoon, my number 7 spot. Here comes the controversy. Just missing out on the top 5 is Todd Browning's 1931 movie that started it all, Dracula. Placing the film at number 6 may seem a little controversial, but this is why I love to rank movies, because everyone will have different opinions on which movies in their favourite franchise they prefer. As much as I love this movie and all of the performances, it's not the best cinematically. Hold on a minute, hold on. Let's not forget the Spanish version. So at this point I am going to say that the Spanish version is a better film cinematically. But don't get me wrong, just because I'm praising the Spanish version of Dracula, that doesn't mean that I dislike Todd Browning's version of Dracula. All I'm saying is that the Spanish version is a superior movie cinematically. I mean, I think we can all agree that Bela Lugosi definitely set the image for Dracula. Every time everyone does an impression, they always use his accent. He set the benchmark. He is the most iconic Dracula in my mind, next to Christopher Lee. So what I am going to say is that Nosferatu from 1922, starring Max Schreck as Count Orlok, and Todd Browning's Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi, are the most important vampire movies ever made. Done. Okay, so we're into the top 5 now. So coming in at number 5 is Phantom of the Opera. Not the Phantom of the Opera, but Phantom of the Opera. That one. There's no question about it. Phantom of the Opera is the most stunning, is visually the most stunning Universal monster movie. It looks superb in Technicolor, and if you do want to watch the movie, I highly recommend getting a Blu-ray copy. It looks amazing. Now, of course I'm going to say this, but the 1925 Lon Chaney version will always be the best film adaptation of Gaston Leroux's story, in my opinion. But the 1943 version definitely comes second. The scenery is great in this movie, especially the Opera House. Originally built for the 1925 movie and was the first steel structure set built on the Universal backlot. It was an exact replica of the real Paris Opera House and many years later was reused for the 1943 movie. Unfortunately, in 2014, the set was demolished. This was such a huge loss because if still standing, it would be the oldest movie set. Moving on to characters now. Claude Rains as Eric Claudan is superb. He can do no wrong. Before becoming the Phantom, he comes across as an innocent, harmless gentleman, but when he realises that his music was stolen by a publicist,
"You've stolen my music!"
he goes into a fit of rage and then is hideously scarred. Now, I guess you could call me picky here, so this is a tiny little nitpick, but I couldn't quite get to grips with the whole character switch. So, Claudine is a harmless character who really admires Christine, and he comes across as a harmless gentleman. But when he realises that his music has been stolen, he just sees complete red and he just goes into a fit of rage. I couldn't quite get my head around that, but then again, saying that, I guess you could say exactly the same thing about Norman Bates from Psycho. I made that up just on the spot. Okay. My opinion's totally changed on that. There are some segments in the film where the operatic scenes go on for a little bit too long, but that's okay, and I'll tell you why. At that point, I'm just taking in all of the scenery from the Opera House because it just looks spectacular. Overall, Phantom 43 is a fantastic Phantom of the Opera movie. Claude Rains really shines in this film, and it's definitely a Phantom film not to be missed. This is the movie that introduced the world to the most recognisable and well-known monster of all time. After portraying Count Dracula for Universal, Bela Lugosi was approached to portray the monster in James Whale's Frankenstein. He turned down the role due to it being a non-speaking role and he would have to be under heavy prosthetics. The actor who would then become Universal's most recognisable monster would be Boris Karloff. From that point forward, he became the most well-known movie monster of all time. And strangely enough, in 1943, Lugosi eventually played the monster in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. Both Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein are so embedded into our pop culture. The movies have been parodied countless times, most famously with Mel Brooks' comedy movie Young Frankenstein. Other than the monster, my favourite character in this movie is Henry Frankenstein, portrayed by Colin Clive. He's so compelling in this film, as I've said before. The "It's Alive" scene is so iconic and has gone on to become one of the most famous movie quotes of all time. And what I love most about Universal monster movies is that they sometimes reuse the same actors. In this case, Edward Van Sloan and Dwight Frye make a return. And much like Dracula, Frankenstein, and even The Bride of Frankenstein, are important horror movies. Hell, important movies in general. And speaking of The Bride of Frankenstein, this movie is definitely on my list for the greatest movie sequels of all time. This is how to make a sequel correctly. I like to call it the Aliens of the Universal monsters. It picks up right where the first movie ended. The introduction to the monster is fantastic. After surviving the burning windmill, he emerges from a water cave and is lit perfectly. And whilst I'm on the topic of the water cave scene, on a side note, what is with the owl's expression? You know what I mean. This movie, in my opinion, definitely feels more like Mary Shelley's novel. My favourite scene in the entire movie, and one of my favourite movie scenes of all time, is where the monster encounters the old blind man. That scene, in my opinion, plays with so many different emotions. The scene is executed wonderfully. Also, I find it kind of interesting that whilst making the movie, James Whale and the Universal Studios psychiatrist actually decided that the monster would have the mental age of a 10-year-old and the emotional age of a 15-year-old lad. And I said this in my review, I truly think that the real villain of this movie is Dr. Pretorius, played by Ernest Thesiger. He's a madman. I mean, for God's sake, he keeps tiny little people in jars. What the hell's going on there? But I'll still say, still to this day, he has one of my favourite lines in the entire movie. Oh, I thought I was alone. It gets me every time. And before wrapping up talking about this movie, I have to mention The Bride of Frankenstein, played by Elsa Lanchester. Now, I always find it kind of weird that Dr. Pretorius announces The Bride of Frankenstein, when technically speaking, it's not. It's the bride of the monster. But I guess it would be a little bit weird if the movie was called The Bride of the Monster. But forgive me, yet again I'm nitpicking. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because both the monster and the Bride of Frankenstein are so embedded into our pop culture, they're so recognisable, and everyone will look at them and know them straight away. The Wolfman is the Universal monster movie that is the most nostalgic for me. It was the first Universal monster movie that I saw. The first time I saw the movie was on VHS. And before the film began, an advertisement would appear and advertise all of the other monster movies on VHS. The covers drew me in, and I hadn't even seen the films at this point. I really enjoy Lon Chaney Jr. in this movie as Larry Talbot, convincing people that he will turn into a werewolf when the moon is full and go on a killing spree. Now, as we all know, the film doesn't really have a great transformation scene. We didn't see Larry's face change from human to wolf until Frankenstein meets the Wolfman in 1943. That being said, when Larry is on screen as the Wolfman, it's brilliant. What I love most about this movie is the atmosphere. The atmosphere in this movie is superb, especially in the woods when the fog surrounds the ground. It's perfect. And out of all of the soundtracks for the Universal monster movies, this is the one that stands out to me the most. The opening scene is fantastic, with the title card and the music playing behind it. It's brilliant. So with all that said, there is only one essential Universal monster movie to talk about, and if you've been keeping track, you'll know exactly what it is. The Invisible Man is my favourite out of all the essential monster movies. Simply, it's a fun movie, and it was so ahead of its time with its special effects. Again, the movie source is taken from literature, and of course, Claude Rains is superb as Professor Jack Griffin. Claude Rains' voice in this movie is just golden.
You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you? All right, I'll show you.
That voice really suits his character. I love his speech as he's revealing himself to be invisible to the other townsfolk. It's so chilling, but at the same time I can't help but smile. Also, let's be honest, what makes Jack Griffin worse is that he's a stone cold killer. He can go from wandering around town, taking off people's hats whilst he's invisible, to scaring an old lady whilst running down the street, singing, all jolly and everything, to then literally derailing a train resulting in hundreds of deaths. So in that sense, the Invisible Man has the highest kill count out of all of the essential Universal monster movies. And what I love most about this movie is that it has so many elements, from science fiction, thriller, drama, comedy, and of course, horror. And because of all of those reasons, The Invisible Man is my favourite movie in the essential Universal monster movies.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
And so guys, if you're still here, thank you for sticking with me. That wraps up my video where I rank all of the essential Universal monster movies. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to comment down below what your favourite Universal monster movie is. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. And if you're new to my channel and you like what you see, why not subscribe and click the bell to stay notified. On that note guys, I will see you in the next video, and as always, take care.